and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today we're going to talk about scary parenting topics. In fact, maybe the thing that scares us the most as parents. My guest is family and relationship expert Alvean Lyons. Welcome.
Hey, Robin.
This is big. This is not, cute little scary. Is my toddler gonna, scrape a knee?
No.
You're going for the big scary.
We're going for that big S. We're going to talk about sex with our kids. And that is a topic that almost every parent is terrified of having a conversation about.
Because, we don't want to think about it. We don't want to think that our kids are ever going to do it, at least, until they're much older, out of the house and married off.
Right.
But in reality, statistically, the number of kids who have sex before they graduate from high school is probably a majority.
It's pretty staggering.
Yeah.
Now, what we do know statistically, just for those of you who have daughters who are athletes, they typically have sex 2 years later than girls who do not play sports, interestingly enough. And the reason they say that that is true is because sports has a tendency to develop a lot of self-confidence. And a lot of times in high school, the reason why girls will get into sexual relationships early on is they're looking for affirmation and confidence. And so if we do not find other ways for them to get that, they have a tendency to find those things in places we as parents would prefer that they didn't. So, to anyone's credit, if they have girls, get your girls involved in something.
True.
Make sure they're busy.
Athletics,
absolutely,
dance,
whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
But
Could
something
be scholastic bowl even.
It is absolutely true, but something that allows them to feel very confident about themselves. Mm-hmm. The more confident your children are, statistically, they will have sex later as a result of that.
Girls.
So,
I don't
girls
think anything
in particular.
works for boys. Sorry to say that.
Interestingly enough, and well, I'll say this, they do know that across the board, confidence makes a difference. They know that, especially if it's provided from something very positive, which is why they use sports and even playing in the band or, there are certain kinds of things that just make kids feel good, particularly things that allow them to perform.
Keeps them busy too, let's be honest about that. If they're occupied.
Unnecessary free time. They fill that with things we would prefer that they didn't.
Right.
So it's very important to have them involved in things that are exciting for them, because they have to be personally passionate about it, that make them feel good about themselves, and that postpones the length of time that they tend to, wait so that they won't get into those sexual relationships prematurely. But for a parent, it's all premature.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Are you ever ready?
No. The answer is no. Generally not. And dads are the worst. They never, especially with their girls.
With their girls, yeah. I don't know, they always feel that way about their sons.
They tend to feel a little different, but for their girls, they never really want to even consider the fact. I mean, when they get married and have children, they prefer to think that that was the story. So we understand that there are some natural things that come with our genders and different ways of looking at things as parents when it comes to our kids. But it is something that we have to have a conversation with them about. Because if we don't, somebody else will. And a lot of times that will come with misinformation. So we want to make sure that we're the person who's having that initial conversation with them. And ideally creating the environment that your kids know that they can come talk to you about it. Because the truth is, most kids will talk to you about virtually anything if they believe that you are a safe place for them to have that conversation. So one of the first things that the research tells us is that we have to be able to have the discussion without judgment. Now, that doesn't mean without values.
Right.
That doesn't mean without your own morals. That's not what they're saying. But they're saying that when we're going to have the conversation, there's a different place that we have to draw from when we're talking to our kids. Because what is very true about kids is that they're incredibly intuitive. So they can feel where you're drawing that from. So if you're answering my question, but you're drawing it from your energy and your words from a critical, judgmental place, even though you may be saying the right things, I can feel what's behind that. So we have to decide mentally as parents that we're going to, and I'm not saying approve of everything, but we're going to create an environment that says that I am more interested in being connected to you and knowing what's going on in your world than trying to make sure that you're doing exactly what I want you to be doing. Because if a kid is going through something, the last thing you want is for them to be going through that with their peers rather than you. So even if it's not what we necessarily want them to be doing, we don't even get a vote if we haven't created an environment where they can talk to us about it. We really want to build those healthy relationships with our kids. And sex is that point where you absolutely want your kids to be talking to you about that as opposed to their peers. So having the discussion in a non-judgmental way is one of the first things that we have to do as parents. Now, the other thing that we have to remember is we're not supposed to be perfect about this. We're not supposed to pretend that we don't have feelings. We actually do better, and our kids respect us more when we admit those things up front.
Right, right.
If we just say, listen, my skin is crawling right now. I'm having a really tough time with this. However, it's far more important to me that we have this conversation than my own personal comfort. So bear with mommy as we have this conversation, or daddy for that matter, because I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I do understand that we need to talk about this. So we're gonna trudge through this mud however we have to do it, but we're gonna do it together. So just admit your discomforts from the beginning. Kids are okay with that.
It helps the kid too, because they don't want to talk about it any more than you do. And so you have these two very uncomfortable people trying to not have a conversation that they're trying to have.
Absolutely.
So if you can get through that awkwardness by being honest about it, it helps.
It makes a world of a difference. It's very true. And everything that we put on the table stops becoming a boogeyman in the conversation. If I just say it, it's just lost its power. So I don't have to worry about being the uncool parent. I already told you, I don't really feel cool about this, but we're gonna have this conversation. So we've taken that off the table. I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm uneasy. I already told you I'm uneasy. So we've taken the power of uneasiness off the table. Everything that we admit to loses its power in the conversation and its ability to detract from our connection. Because the other thing that my honesty does is say to you that I'm willing to be vulnerable with you, so that it's safe for you to be vulnerable with me. And it's okay. We have to remember that we're modeling these behaviors. A lot of times we forget that our kids are still watching us because they seem so fixed on doing things their own way that we don't even feel like we are playing that role anymore. But we are, it's just a silent role now. It's kind of like the movie without the volume, you know? They're still watching and they're still paying attention and there's still a whole story that they're writing. But if we want them to turn the volume on so that they can hear us, we have to make sure that no matter whether or not they're turning it up or turning it down, we're still going through the process. We're gonna do this and we're gonna have this conversation and it's gonna be as imperfect as ever, but we're still going to make sure that this happens. And as long as we do those things, it makes a world of a difference in connecting with our kids. So have the discussion and put it all on the table and don't be judgmental about it. Keep your values though, and don't be afraid to share them. Because it's also okay to say to your kids, listen, I would prefer that you were in college or that you were engaged or married or whatever your values are surrounding the issue. This is what I want for you.
Right, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Absolutely.
But I can't control that.
I can't control that. I would hope that you would take that into consideration. I would hope that you see those things maybe similarly. I would love it if you saw them the same. You know, be light about it, but be honest about it. And be firm about the fact that this is really where I stand. I always tell people, parent in wet cement. And what I mean by that is know where you stand. That's the cement component. But allow your cement to be wet in the sense that your kids, they're all different and they have different needs. You may have to move a little to the left, to the right, to the center. You may have to move in some way, but they need to know for sure that your feet are planted somewhere because kids look for consistency. But at the same time that there's enough room that they still can influence you in such a way that you parent personal to them and what they need. So parent in wet cement. Know who you are, but give room for your kids to be who they need to be also. And they're very individual personalities, especially if you have more than one. Gosh, we can put them all out with the same gene pool and they can end up totally different. So what we did for child 1 is not gonna be the same thing that worked for child 3.
Right.
We have to be able to grow with our kids also. So give yourself room.
Okay.
So then the other thing that I will say is that know the facts also. We have to bone up on our facts. Some of the things that we knew when we did health in school, not the same anymore. And it's not to say that that information isn't accurate, but how that is being used is different. There are new drugs that are out. There are new methodologies for being able to prevent certain kinds of things. There is new awareness about the exposures to certain kinds of things. And I'm talking about STDs and the like. Understanding what your options are different than they were when we were younger. So we want to bone up on the facts because we want to make sure that we're not giving misinformation. We're not looking to be a source that can easily be discredited, in the sense that we give them information that is 2 decades old, and then they talk to a friend of theirs who seems to know what's going on right now, and suddenly it appears that my mom and my dad are not the best source of information.
And if they're wrong on one thing, they're wrong on everything.
They must be wrong on everything.
Yeah, they don't know anything
They've got to be wrong on everything. So I'm not saying that we have to be perfect, but I am saying that we do need to be informed. It does make a difference, especially as we're laying this groundwork with our kids, to say that I am a viable and useful source to have conversation with about such a sensitive issue.
Now, when do you start? What age? I mean, I know everybody is going to interpret this differently, and it depends on the child, but you don't wait until the kid's, 16 or 18.
No, you
just
don't. You have what I call developmentally appropriate conversations. When kids ask you questions, they're interested. So if your kid is 5 and says, "Where do babies come from?" you have to decide developmentally how much you think your kid is ready for. But every child is different. So I can't say to you that there's a perfect age. Tell 5-year-olds this, tell 10-year-olds this, tell 15-year-olds this, because they mature in different kinds of ways and understand different things. What has already been shared with them could be very different also. So how much you may have to unteach them before you teach them the proper thing may also be very different. So there is not one simple panacea, something that's just going to be the perfect solution for everything. But anytime the conversation comes up, do understand that anything that comes out of your child's mouth is swirling around inside their head.
And other things are that don't come out too.
Absolutely.
They never, well, at least boys, never put it all on the table.
No. So you have to expect to do some digging, and you may have to expect to do some initiating. It may need to come from you first in order for the conversation to even remotely be broached. And you may bring it up at one point and don't hear another word about it for 3-4 months with a boy. That's very common. But it doesn't change the fact that we still have a responsibility to the process. So we still need to have these conversations. The other thing I encourage parents to do is use time wisely, in the sense that you can use media opportunities to have conversation. It could be a song you're hearing on the radio, and the lyrics in the song could be a perfect gateway to saying, "Hey, I just heard you singing A, B, C, and D. What do you think about that?" Because every song these days is telling about a guy-girl relationship in some form or fashion, there's so many complexities, but I was talking about some kind of relationship. Those can be great door openers to us having a conversation that we might have felt awkward figuring out how to open this discussion. Watching television, you could be sure that if you flip a channel after 8 o'clock,
holy cow,
there is something that you can talk about. So use those opportunities also. They are fantastic ways to lead in to a discussion, even if it's just to see, what does my kid think about what he or she just saw? And that may help you figure out what kinds of conversations do I need to make sure we have in the very near future. But start it as young as your kid's interest begins. Now, there are some kids that just don't say anything, and you know that they're being exposed to everything.
Right.
In situations like that, that's where that media comes in very handy, because even though my child didn't initiate it, it's giving me a doorway to be able to have the conversation.
You've watched something on TV, you've heard a song, you can bring up the conversation. The other thing I think in terms of having it more frequently is the first time, sometimes the child is literally so uncomfortable when you get to the teenage years, and you're not talking about, how do you make a baby, kind of biology kinds of things. Is that they're not really listening. And so, having it again, following it up maybe in writing or giving them a book or, read this, and again, this is what I think, but I know it's your life, at least know what know what's out there.
Absolutely.
And you have kids who are just more introverted too, or prefer to find things out in different ways.
And we have kids that mentally are in different places, whether you're dealing with issues of autism. We can go to, there's a gamut of experiences that we may be having, absolutely. And we may have children who just don't process at the same level. There's so many different things that could be factors, which really require that we individually as parents recognize what our own child may need. But what is going to be across the board true is that we have to have the conversation. And we have to be a part of making sure that there's real understanding being developed. Sometimes if we just hand our kids something, we don't necessarily know, did you read it?
Right.
We don't know how you interpreted what you read.
Right.
We don't know what questions you might have had. So sometimes it may even mean, let's talk about it together.
Talk about it together.
Let's read it together. And which is why I love using media, even social media, because some of the things that are posted, perfect opportunity for us to discuss this.
Yeah, especially if you're friends with your kids' friends, or if you overhear things when people are over, you can follow up on that.
And I fundamentally believe as parents, you should overhear as much as you possibly can.
It is the best way to get information.
On purpose, hear as much as you possibly can, because it really is, for us, it is just a godsend in terms of being able to find out what's going on in our kids' worlds.
Right.
And all of that becomes strategic for us in terms of where to navigate.
Because
so
even
that
if
we're
it's
giving
not
them what they
your
need.
child saying it, it's the people that surround your child, and they have a big influence.
Yes, they do. More influence than sometimes we want them to, which is why it really matters what it is that we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're paying attention to, so that even before there's an issue where our kids are concerned, we are already one step ahead of that if we can be, or at least on pace, so that we are able to give our kids the kind of support that we want them to have. But we can never abdicate the throne as parents. It's our job to build really effective relationships with our kids.
And if we have that, then we can have the talk.
Absolutely.
More than one.
Absolutely.
More than one talk.
And if we need help figuring out how to do that, understand that there are resources that can help us do that. In the city of Hampton,
What a good idea.
you've got Healthy Families that talks all the time about building better relationships. They have so many programs for those kinds of things. And it's not just about learning to have a conversation about the scary parenting topics like sex, but it's also about learning how to develop that kind of connection and the communication with our kids. So between Healthy Families and Youth Education and Family Services, which really is the umbrella that supports all of that, you have resources right here locally that can help make that happen a little smoother.
And that's important too, because I think people tend to think of Healthy Families as being for parents of young kids, and they have teenage programs, and the teenagers get together and talk about it, and the parents talk about it, and then you talk with your own kid, and it just helps you have that conversation you might be afraid to have.
It's so true, and then you're doing it with other people. So you have the support. You know you're not alone in this process. Healthy Families quite literally has something at every developmental stage for your kids. I mean, thematically, they really focus on everybody being ready by 21. So you're really talking about going through the entire childhood, adolescent, teen, into young adulthood, preparing the child for the totality of life. We are in a city who really cares about what it is that we're doing in our own families and supporting that in every way.
All right.
We can do
Confidence,
this.
Courage, we can do it.
We
can
absolutely
face
can.
the scariest parenting topic, or at least one of the scariest parenting topics that are out there.
And we don't have to do it alone.
That's right. Thank you. I hope you've learned some good tips and maybe just gotten that push to go out there and communicate with your child about the things you don't want to talk about and they don't want to talk about, but have to be talked about. Thanks for watching.